Welcome, third grade, to science. We are talking today about amphibians. You should have already read pages 12 and 13. So now what I'm going to do is just go over some things that we're going to point out today from our reading and things that you should probably take note of or remember. So what we're going to look at today, we're going to be able to name the three kinds of amphibians. We're going to list common characteristics of amphibians. We're going to define what the word metamorphosis means. And then we're going to identify the three stages of an amphibian's life cycle. Amphibians are quite interesting animals. The word amphibian itself means double life, and we will understand what that double life is as we go through the slides here. So what is an amphibian? An amphibian is a cold-blooded animal that lives part of their lives in water and part of their lives on land. So when an amphibian is born, it does not look like its parent. Amphibians lay eggs, those eggs hatch, and then for a little bit, they look nothing like their parent. But as the amphibian grows, it slowly becomes like its parent. And we're going to see when they're first born, they have gills. And as they grow, they develop lungs. So amphibians definitely have a double life. What is a metamorphosis? Metamorphosis, changes that happen as an amphibian becomes an adult. And we say a metamorphosis just basically means a change. Many animals go through metamorphosis. The butterfly cycle is a metamorphosis. So I do believe these words are on your vocabulary list, and you should be reviewing those. We'll probably have a test over that vocabulary list one day next week. Hopefully the snow is gone and we'll be in school all of next week and we'll be able to get that quiz completed. So back to amphibians. Reading page 12 and 13, what are the three kinds of amphibians that it talked about in our reading? Can you name three types of amphibians? Frogs would be one, toads, salamanders are all types of amphibians. Then what is metamorphosis? What does that mean? It is basically what? Can you say it? A change. Metamorphosis basically is a change. Now, here is a picture of different types of amphibians. A frog, a toad, a salamander, and a newt. Now, salamanders and newts are similar to each other. So some people, some scientists will just put a newt in the same category as a salamander. And some people will put frogs and toads in the same group together, but they are different. They all have amphibian characteristics, but they are different from each other. So, from your reading, as you read through there, you should have found some characteristics of amphibians. So amphibians live part of their lives in water and part on land. The water part, they live from the time they're a baby. And then when we used to have tadpoles and we would watch them grow as a class, we would see, after a few months, the little tadpole would start coming up and he would lay his head on the rock. His body would be immersed in the water, but he would lay his head up on the rock. That's when we knew, okay, he's developing lungs. because now he needs to breathe air. He just can't stay underwater the entire time. So there's a certain part in their life when they develop lungs, then they no longer can live 100% underwater. And we know that amphibians are cold-blooded, and we talked about cold-blooded. Cold-blooded basically means what? Yes. The body temperature changes depending on the situation or the circumstances or the surroundings. If it's hot outside, they're going to get very hot and they're going to need shade. Vice versa. If it's cold outside, then they're going to get cold and they're going to want to run to where there's heat. Amphibians hatch from eggs. Amphibians have thin, smooth, moist skin. Amphibians, an interesting thing is, do not need to drink water. They absorb water through their skin. So their skin is always moist, and that gives them the body that they need. Now, they do drink water. The geckos that I have a water dish in there, and they drink water, but they don't need to. And then they breathe with gills when they're young, but then they develop lungs when they become an adult. So these are characteristics of what makes an amphibian and amphibian. Here's a fact. Amphibians can be found on every continent except Antarctica. At least 230 species of amphibians live in North America. Question for you. Why do you think they don't live in Antarctica? Do you have an idea? Think of where Antarctica is. What kind of weather is there? That's right, it's too cold. They would all freeze to death. It's interesting, 230 different species of amphibians that live just here in North America. So tree frogs are another one that's kind of neat. I found one in our yard one time, and I kept it for about 4 months in a cage and just watched it and observed it. It was quite interesting. And then I put it back out on one of the trees on our property here. So, all right, here are the stages of metamorphosis. So, this is the stage of metamorphosis that is in your book. I think it's on page 13. So here's what we have. A frog will lay these little eggs. Then the eggs hatch into what we call tadpoles. Now, does that tadpole look anything like its mama? No, it doesn't. But as the tadpole begins to grow, we say, maybe when it's a teenager, it becomes a froglet. And if you watch this froglet has a long tail. But if you watch the froglet long enough, it's pretty cool because you can see that tail start to shrink up and just absorb up into the froglet's body, and then it becomes an adult frog. What's also neat about tadpoles is if you watch them closely, you can see when their little arms and legs start to sprout and when they grow. But this metamorphosis is an amazing thing. And when you think about this, only God could create something like this, a life cycle. The eggs, the tadpole, the froglet, and then the adult frog, and then the stage goes all over again. But God is so creative and so wonderful that He gives us things like this that kind of baffle our minds a little bit. And they make us realize, God, you're the one who did this. Quite amazing. So this picture here is a picture of some frog eggs. Now, if you notice, To me, they look like little, those little wiggly eyes that we use sometimes for crafts. But if you notice, there are thousands here. But maybe only about 10 will survive because birds, other animals will come and eat up the little eggs. But to try to protect the frog eggs, there is a little film, if you can see it here, the little, looks like maybe they're covered in saran wrap. Um, the frogs will put this little film, slimy film, over the eggs to try to protect them. It does help some, but not all. But these are what frog eggs look like if you were to see them in a pond. I know I had one family one time that brought me frog eggs in, and they found them in their swimming pool. They said they had hundreds of them. So they could be found in ponds or swimming pools. So next time you're out by a water, a lake, or river, look for these little things. And that's what they are, frog eggs. So here is a salamander's metamorphosis. Pretty much the same as a frog. They start out as an egg, and then they hatch into, here you see they have no arms, they have no legs. So that's what makes salamanders, again, an amphibian. Here's the life cycle of a newt. You could see there's eggs here. They come from eggs. Now, when they first come out, they have no arms or legs. They look nothing like eventually what they will look like as an adult. So I just find this interesting. The metamorphosis that happens in these creatures. So let's go back. What is an amphibian? An amphibian is a cold-blooded animal. It lives part of its life on water, in water, part on land. It's cold-blooded. It has smooth, thin, moist skin. And so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about an amphibian. So what do we call the changes that happen as an amphibian becomes an adult? We call that a metamorphosis. Excellent. So on Monday, we'll talk about reptiles. And we'll focus on the difference between, we'll look at the characteristics of the amphibians, characteristics of the reptiles, and we will see what the difference is. So please be working on memorizing your vocabulary for Science Chapter 1. Next week, we will have a quiz over those words. And so I want to make sure that you know what each word means and understand the meaning of it. Knowing those vocab is going to help you understand Chapters 1 and Chapter 2. All right, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you Monday.